There's a date engraved in stone that the Maya left on dozens of monuments throughout their civilization. A date that modern astronomers took decades to decipher. And when they finally did, they realized something that chilled their blood. The Maya had calculated with millimeter precision astronomical events that would occur centuries after their civilization disappeared. Without telescopes, without computers, without any technology that we would consider advanced. Just observation, mathematics, and an understanding of the cosmos that we still cannot fully comprehend today. And that's just the beginning of what I'm going to tell you today. There's a date carved in stone that the Maya left on dozens of monuments throughout their entire civilization. A date that modern astronomers took decades to decipher. And when they finally did, they realized something that chilled them to the bone. The Maya had calculated with pinpoint precision astronomical events that would occur centuries after their civilization disappeared. Without telescopes, without computers, without any technology that we would consider advanced. Just observation, mathematics, and an understanding of the cosmos that we still don't fully comprehend today. And that is barely the beginning of what I'm going to tell you today. Because the Maya weren't just good with the stars. They were architects, doctors, farmers, warriors, philosophers, and artists at a level that shatters any preconceived idea you might have about what it means to be an ancient civilization. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to take you straight to the heart of all of that. No detours, no boring textbook language. If you're one of those people who feel that official history is always hiding something from you, that there are layers beneath what we were taught in school, this channel is exactly for you. Subscribe right now. Hit the bell and tell me in the comments. What is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word Maya? I want to know where we're starting from. Let's go back to the year 2000 before Christ. In the region we know today as southeastern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador, something begins to emerge that at first glance seems modest. Villages, families, people planting corn, fishing, trading goods with neighboring communities. Nothing that at first glance seems extraordinary. But beneath that apparent simplicity, there is something that is going to change the Mesoamerican world forever. A collective obsession with understanding time. Not time the way we understand it. Glancing at a clock to see if we're running late for work. Time as a living force, as a sacred entity, as the invisible fabric that connects human beings to the gods, to the stars, to the cycles of nature, and to the dead. For the Maya, time was not linear. It didn't go from point A to point B. It was circular, cyclical, eternal. And understanding it was not an intellectual luxury. It was a spiritual and political obligation. From that obsession was born one of the most sophisticated creations in all of human history, the Maya calendar system. And this is where things get truly mind-blowing. The Maya didn't have just one calendar. They had several, running simultaneously like gears in a gigantic cosmic clock. The Tzolk'in was a sacred calendar of 260 days, divided into 20 periods of 13 days each, used to determine a person's destiny according to the day of their birth, to schedule rituals, to make decisions of war and peace. The Hab was a solar calendar of 365 days, divided into 18 months of 20 days, plus 5 extra days, considered dangerous and unlucky. And when these two calendars combined, they created the calendar round, a 52-year cycle that repeated with an astronomical precision that modern scientists, with all their technology, have not been able to significantly improve upon. But there was more. The long count calendar measured time in enormous periods, from the mythical origin of the current world to dates projected thousands of years into the future. And it was that calendar that in 2012 generated all the media hysteria about the Maya end of the world, which of course never happened as such. What ended in December 2012 was simply a great cycle of 5,125 years. For the Maya, it wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of a new era. The question nobody asks is, why did they need such a precise and complex calendar? The answer says everything about who they really were. Agriculture. Everything started and ended there. Corn was not just food for the Maya. It was sacred. It was the substance from which, according to their cosmology, human beings were made. The Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Quiche, one of the great Maya peoples, tells how the gods attempted to create humanity first from clay, then from wood, and only succeeded when they used corn dough. That idea was not poetic metaphor. It was literal theology. It was the reason every kernel of corn was treated with reverence. Wasting food was not carelessness. It was sacrilege. And to grow corn in the tropical jungle, you needed to know exactly when the rains were coming, when the droughts would hit, at what point in the year the earth was ready to receive the seed. You needed to predict the behavior of Venus, because for the Maya, Venus was not simply a bright planet in the night sky. It was the star of war. Its cycles determined when it was favorable to attack enemies and when it was better to wait. The Maya's astronomical records on Venus are so precise that they have a margin of error of just 2 hours over a period of 500 years. 2 hours, over 500 years, without telescopes. Hold on, before we continue with the most impressive part of the story, I need to tell you about something that completely changed the way I understand these civilizations. I found an ebook called The Secrets of the Wealth of Ancient Civilizations, and it talks about something almost nobody explains. How peoples like the Maya, the Egyptians, the Romans, and the Mesopotamians built economic, spiritual, and social systems of a richness that the modern world still hasn't entirely surpassed. It's not a boring history book. It's a read that transforms your perspective entirely. It's available at the link in the description of this video. It costs just 10 euros. And besides giving you information you won't find in any classroom, you're directly supporting this channel so we can keep producing content like this. 10 euros. What you'd spend on a burger and a drink. The link is down below. Let's get back to the Maya. Let's talk about the cities. Because when most people think about the Maya, they think about pyramids lost in the jungle. And yes, the pyramids exist, and they are impressive. But that's like describing New York by saying it has tall buildings. Maya cities at their peak were megacities. Tikal, in the heart of what is today Guatemala, had between 100,000 and 200,000 inhabitants at its height, around the 8th century after Christ. Tikal, in the heart of what is today Guatemala, had between 100,000 and 200,000 inhabitants at its height, around the 8th century after Christ. That put it on par with the largest cities in Europe at that same time. And Tikal was not the only one. Calakmul, Palenque, Copan, Chichen Itza, Uxmal, Caracol. Each one was a political, religious, economic, and cultural center with its own identity, its own rulers, its own alliances, and its own wars. Because here is something most people don't know. The Maya were never a unified empire. They were something much more similar to ancient Greece. A shared cultural civilization expressed through dozens of independent city-states that sometimes cooperated, sometimes traded, and sometimes went to war with each other in brutal and ritualized ways. And that war had rules. It wasn't simply about killing as many enemies as possible. The main objective of Maya conflicts was to capture living prisoners, especially rival nobles and rulers, to use them in sacrifice rituals. It sounds brutal, and it was. But understanding it requires stepping completely out of our modern mindset and getting into the logic of the Maya world. For the Maya, blood was the fuel of the cosmos. The gods had shed their own blood to create human beings, and human beings had the obligation to repay that debt through sacrifice. Without blood, the sun didn't rise. Without blood, the rains didn't come. Without blood, the corn didn't grow. Sacrifice was not cruelty. It was cosmic maintenance. It was the monthly bill that had to be paid to keep the universe running. Maya rulers personally participated in self-sacrifice rituals, cutting their tongue or genitals with stingray spines to offer their own blood to the gods. They did it in public, in front of thousands of people, to demonstrate that the king was not just a politician or a warrior. He was the intermediary between the human world and the divine world. His body was literally sacred. Hey, pause here. Tell me in the comments which part of the Maya fascinates you the most. Their astronomy, their architecture, their writing system, or the whole topic of sacrifice and religion. I'm going to read the best comments in the next video. I genuinely want to know what you think. Let's talk about writing, because it is one of the most extraordinary achievements in all of pre-Columbian America. The Maya developed the only truly complete writing system on the American continent. It was not a system of simple symbolic drawings. It was a complex hieroglyphic script where signs could represent sounds, syllables, or entire concepts, and where frequently several different forms could be used to express exactly the same idea. The flexibility and richness of that system is comparable to Egyptian writing, with the difference that the Egyptians had the support of Mediterranean civilizations to preserve and transmit their knowledge. The Maya did it alone, and we almost lost everything. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, a bishop named Diego de Landa ordered the burning of all the Maya books he could find, in what we today consider one of the most devastating acts of cultural destruction in human history. Only 4 books survived, called codices. 4 out of thousands. What we lost in those flames is incalculable. Medical, historical, astronomical, literary, philosophical knowledge. Entire generations of accumulated wisdom, reduced to ashes in an afternoon. And yet the Maya survived, not as an archaeological relic, as living, present, active people. Today there are more than 7 million people who identify as Maya and who speak one of the more than 30 Maya languages that are still alive. In the markets of Chiapas, in the cornfields of Yucatan, in the highland communities of Guatemala, there are people who carry in their memory, in their language, in their rituals, and in their relationship with the land, fragments of that extraordinary civilization that history books reduce to pyramids and calendars. The classic collapse of the great Maya cities, which occurred between the 9th and 10th centuries after Christ, remains one of the most debated mysteries in modern archaeology. In a period of barely 100 years, dozens of the largest cities in the Maya world were abandoned. Construction stopped. Inscriptions ceased to be carved. The elites disappeared, and the jungle began to silently swallow what had taken centuries to build. What happened? Researchers have proposed severe droughts that destroyed the agricultural base, endless wars that exhausted resources and destabilized political systems, overpopulation that exceeded the land's capacity to sustain so many people, trade collapse, social rebellions of the lower classes against an increasingly extractive and distant elite. It was probably all of that together, a perfect storm of factors that fed off each other until it became impossible to maintain the system. What is clear is that the collapse was not the end of the Maya. It was a transformation. The cities of northern Yucatan continued to flourish. Chichen Itza and Uxmal reached their peak splendor precisely when the southern cities had already been abandoned. And when the Spanish arrived, they found not an extinct civilization, but a living, fragmented, and still powerful civilization, which resisted the conquest for decades in some regions, and that in certain areas, like the Petan jungle, was not completely subdued until 1697. Almost 200 years after Columbus arrived. That resistance says something fundamental about who the Maya are. They were not passive victims of history. They were active protagonists who negotiated, resisted, adapted, and survived. And they are still here. The next time you see a photograph of the pyramids of Chichen Itza or Palenque, don't see them as ruins of something that was lost. See them as messages, as letters written in stone by people who knew that time passes, that empires fall, but that truly powerful ideas find a way to survive. The Maya understood that better than anyone. That is why they built in stone. That is why they carved their knowledge into the walls of their temples. That is why they designed calendars to last thousands of years. Not because they were naive and believed everything would last forever, but precisely because they knew it wouldn't. And they wanted someone, at some future moment, to be able to read what they had learned. Today we are that someone, and we are only just beginning to understand what they left us. If this video moved something inside you, if you feel there is a debt owed to these civilizations that deserve more than a paragraph in an elementary school textbook, share this video with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And remember that the ebook, The Secrets of the Wealth of Ancient Civilizations, is in the description for just €10. A read that perfectly complements everything we covered today, and that also directly supports this channel. See you in the next mystery.